This is Sarah with Birth Circle, and today I have a super rare opportunity to have another discussion with one of our past guests. So, Bailey Gaddis and I had an amazing discussion last year about her book Feng Shui Mommy and what it means to be Feng Shui. And if you haven't listened to that episode, go back and search it because it's really, really fun, light, but it gives a lot of great insight into how to prepare your birth space and your home space for transitioning into motherhood as gracefully as possible. I say that with, quotes gracefully because never really graceful, but the whole principle of feng shui is to keep balance. And so she just has some amazing insight. So today we get to talk about her brand new book, which is called Asking for a Pregnant Friend. And we touched a little bit, it was in the works last time we podcasted. So this time we get to go deep, deep, deep. I'm super excited. But the cover also says 101 answers to questions women are too embarrassed to ask about pregnancy, childbirth, and motherhood. So not only do you get to read this later in print, but you get to hear our giggles and just kidding. We're totally not embarrassed about any of these things because we are so empowered and we've talked about all the boobs and vaginas possible. No, actually, what I love about this discussion, the first time we had it, is there are things that Bailey pointed out that we don't even recognize in our culture that we have stigmatized. And so that they have like this coloring, this overlay of them. So, okay. Thank you for being back here, Bailey. I'm super excited.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Okay. So let's just launch right in. You've got 101. We've got, uh, 3
Yeah,
hours.
I mean, you
So,
have 4 hours?
just kidding. Let's get started. First of all, what made you decide to do this book?
Yeah, it was a combination of my own experience, being pregnant, being a new mom, and having all sorts of questions that, of course, I would Google. But a lot of times when I would Google these questions, it was either like really watered down information that I would find. They didn't like really answer my question, or forums with women discussing it. And sadly, a lot of times the woman that asked the question was shamed and there was a lot of judgment. So it just made me feel even more shame about these questions. And I just kind of like pushed it all aside. And then when I started teaching childbirth preparation, when I became a birth doula, I would have women that would kind of like pull me aside after class and would whisper some of these questions that I had that I was so embarrassed about. And so it helped me realize, okay, I'm not the only one. There's a
Mm-hmm.
lot of women that are also asking these questions, but are also, or they have these questions, but they're afraid to ask them. And it's really interesting because I'm actually pregnant again right now,
Yay!
and and I feel now that I've acknowledged, all the questions I've had, I've looked into them, I feel so much lighter this time. Anyways, that's kind of an aside. But so yeah, I really was hoping to bring that to other women, reducing that shame or hopefully even eliminating it and just helping us have a more open, enjoyable experience, into
Yeah.
motherhood.
Yeah. Awesome. Okay, so we're gonna dive right in. So let's tackle one of the most controversial, maybe embarrassing questions.
Yeah.
What we've heard the term orgasmic birth, but what does orgasm during pregnancy and birth actually mean? That can you orgasm? Can you? I'm of course just asking for a friend. So
Yeah, right, of course. So to me, this can mean two different things. So the really traditional, interpretation of an orgasmic birth is a woman actually having orgasms during contractions when she's birthing. And this is a thing. It happens to a pretty small amount of women. Part of it is somewhat genetic, how genetically predisposed we are to easily orgasm. Those lucky women, I think it's like
like, can
0.5%
this
of
be
us.
taught?
Yeah, I know. It's like they're so lucky. And I've had some women that have had that experience, and they're like, yeah, I feel like the whole genetic part is part of it, but these women also really put in a lot of preparation, and did certain things during their birth. And this is kind of a taboo thing to say, but even masturbated during birth to help themselves have that orgasm and shift from that space of pain to pleasure. So
Yeah, I was
that's
gonna say it doesn't seem like you could have an orgasm if you're in fear and pain,
yeah.
obviously.
So
So
exactly. So they had to do a lot of work to get out of that space of fear. A lot of these women do a lot of work to shift their perceptions about, sexuality, childbirth, and motherhood, because a lot of times we think, and this is funny because of course, unless we're doing IVF or, using fertility care, you have sex to get pregnant. But then when we're birthing and then we're
Wait, that
mothers,
should have
like,
been the first embarrassing question. I know when we got pregnant, the first thing we got that pregnancy test. My husband wasn't like, "Oh, I can't wait to be a dad." He goes, "Oh no, now your parents are gonna know we did it." And I'm like,
duh.
duh." Yeah, there you go. There's that first embarrassing
Yeah.
question.
Well, and it's so true, it's like the minute we like pee on that stick, it's like there's the shift happens with like, oh, my sexual side over here and like motherhood over here. But I mean, of course they're intertwined,
Right.
and so these women that have this orgasmic birth, a lot of times they put in a lot of work to help to like meld the two in a really healthy way, to
Yeah.
realize that uh, I was really in my, sexual self, my sexual being when I became pregnant. And it just makes sense to kind of tap back into that more sensual side of me during birth. And a lot of women that have the orgasm, they talk about kind of reaching this choice where they can either tip into pain or pleasure, and they use certain breathing techniques, masturbation, to help themselves tip into pleasure. um, but this brings me to my other interpretation of it, because women can do all of the things, all of the things I list in the book, but it's just they just can't get to that space of orgasm. And I think that that's fine. I think you can still have an orgasmic birth without the orgasm, meaning that you can have these feelings of ecstasy, of
Mhm.
relief, of joy, of overwhelming joy during birth without having the
The
orgasm.
actual
So,
okay.
you know,
So I have a
oh,
question.
yeah,
So I experienced the fetal ejection reflex with my last baby, which is basically like sneezing your baby out. Like you cannot hold it back. The baby shoots out of you.
yeah,
Just a reflex that you can't
yeah,
stop it. The midwife saying slow down, and you like can't. It's a
yeah.
response, right?
Mhm.
And that actually felt weirdly good, like a sneeze, but it was definitely not an orgasm. So, like,
Yeah.
how do you know if it's an orgasm or if it's just feeling good or like what, you know?
Yeah, that's a good question. And of course, we can interpret it any way we want, but typically with an orgasm, you're feeling these like pulsations of blood down to the vagina. The clitoris becomes a bit swollen. During an orgasm during birth, I mean, it's pretty much the
It's
same
gonna
as an
be the same.
orgasm.
Okay.
It's going to be the same, yeah. And a lot of times it is kind of like a rolling orgasm because your uterus is continuing to surge, and so it kind of carries on the orgasm. I mean,
That sounds like you could have some pretty great ones then, huh?
it's amazing. What is the video? It's called Birth as We Know It on YouTube, and there's an orgasmic birth in it. And this, I mean, it's amazing to watch. It's about the middle of the documentary, and the woman, her eyes are like rolling back in her head, and she's just like laughing. I think it's very inspirational to watch, because you're like, there it
I was
is.
gonna say
Like,
inspirational or disturbing. I mean, if you don't know what you're looking at, that could be kind of worrisome, but
right. But yeah, then she describes it and it's so beautiful. She talks about feeling this like surge of energy spiraling, through her, and really
cool.
channeling it. So yeah, it's totally possible to have the orgasm, but again, it's a small, bit of women, but all of us, regardless of how genetically predisposed we are to easily orgasm, we all have access to that orgasmic experience,
Got it.
and that overwhelming joy.
Okay, so one more question on this field, and then I'll move on to another uncomfortable topic. Just kidding. What about arousal during breastfeeding?
Yeah. So this one, for a lot of women, is one of the biggest producers of shame, because when we're birthing, we don't have the baby yet, so we're still a little bit, more comfortable connecting with our sexuality. But when we are holding our baby and we are feeding our baby, and our culture tells us that our breasts are this like sexual, part of our body, and of course, breasts have been over sexualized in our
Mhm.
culture. When a woman feels aroused during breastfeeding, a lot of thoughts can go through her head, like, I'm sick, there's something wrong with me for
And
having
what
these.
does arousal mean? Like, does she feel attraction for her baby or for her partner or just generally attracted to the couch? I mean, what is
It, yeah, so it's really like a biological feeling, so
Mhm.
it's more about maybe even feeling like more blood going down to the vagina, some pulsations in the vagina. Some women can actually orgasm during breastfeeding. This usually happens if their legs are crossed, and so there's like some clitoral stimulation. And the thing with breastfeeding, it releases oxytocin, right? So an oxytocin during
Oh,
sex,
okay.
during, so
Hmm.
it's really this biological process in the body that's happening. It's not your mind getting attracted, like sexually attracted to your baby or anything like that. It is really just the body having a reaction to this release of oxytocin, to
Okay,
having
all
the,
right.
the nipples stimulated. So these women that experience this, it's not at all about sexual attraction to anybody. It's just what's happening in their body.
Okay,
Once we,
interesting.
realize that, we can take away the shame.
All right, so I wanna go then the other side of the spectrum because I've heard some women, say when they breastfeed, they get very, very angry, and they get very like, their body then goes into that anger, anxiety reflex while they're breastfeeding, and they also feel shame about that because they are supposed to be loving this little baby, but every time they nurse, they just get angry. Have you heard of that?
I have with some women, yeah. And I was talking to a midwife about it, and she had, some interesting insights. She was saying, one thing, and it's especially with women that already have other children, we're just like overtouched. We feel like we
Mm,
have too much touch, and then when you're breastfeeding, it's so much touch, right? An intimate part of your body that is being heavily utilized, and that can trigger irritation, like, god, like, my body is just over it. You know with it, it's a big sense of responsibility, right? It's like, god, I'm one of the primary sources of nutrients for this baby. And it doesn't mean we don't continue to do it or we don't want to, but that can trigger
mhm.
frustration too. Like, I have so much responsibility on my shoulders. So yeah, there's a lot of, emotional things that can come up during breastfeeding that can understandably cause irritation or even anger, and it.
Awesome, yeah. Yeah, I heard that, and I never go I liked that midwives yeah. But it's nothing to be ashamed of. It's just, again, your body reacting to stimulus and something's going on, so find somebody you trust and talk to them about it. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay, so another, uncomfortable subject would be just what happens during pregnancy, sexuality, and but also in a relationship. What if a partner strays during pregnancy?
Yeah, so I was shocked actually when I was doing the research for this book that it's actually more common than I had realized.
Oh gosh, that's yucky.
Isn't it sad? Yeah, I know. And I make sure to note in the book, it's like, look, you're not a statistic, just because, X amount of men well, and actually this is interesting. The study that was done was about, heterosexual couples, but other studies actually found that same-sex couples, that actually it's like a pretty similar rate of infidelity during pregnancy with same-sex partners as well. And the reasoning, or at least the believed reasoning, of course nobody knows exactly why an
Mhm.
individual strays, is that there could be a couple different reasons. So one that they researched is that a lot of women, when they're pregnant, especially in the first trimester, you don't feel like having sex. And this is not all women, but it's very normal to feel like I can't go there right now. Maybe you feel sick, just physically you're not feeling
Mhm.
great. And so this partner is starting to feel like, well, if I can't get it from you, I'm going to go somewhere else, which of course signifies all sorts of other issues. And then emotionally as well, it's not just about the physical component, but a lot of times pregnant women, understandably, we have a lot going on emotionally, and you don't have a lot of space, to offer your
So
partner,
true.
sympathy for what's going on at work. Or, I mean, you just don't have as much patience for helping them through their own emotional stress. And so sometimes that can lead the partner to go find that emotional comfort somewhere else, which can sometimes lead to a physical relationship. So those were the two key reasons pinpointed for, causes of strain during pregnancy. And then again, sometimes women just have that fear and they just have insecurity come up, even when the partner is not at all, having a desire to stray. And of course that signifies, like I felt that honestly with my first pregnancy with my husband. I had this huge fear come up, and it was really stressful for me for a couple of months until I finally talked to him about it. And I told him, it's like, look, you haven't done anything to make me feel this way, but I just have this fear coming up. And through communication, we worked through it, which is, of course, one of the main things I recommend is talking about it,
Yeah. Yeah.
because it's one of the best ways through.
Yeah, just talking about it, yeah. Okay, so, on the same lines, you already mentioned that women sometimes they don't feel in the mood to have sex during various parts of their pregnancy, but what are some of the ways, like so what are some of the questions you hear about sexuality during pregnancy that you just wanna just dispel? Well, like one, "If I have intercourse, will he hit the baby's head?" Like, stuff like that. Tell me
Yeah.
all of the little the
Yeah. So that's a big one, is that concern about the baby. Like, does the baby know what we're doing? Like, men, especially, like
"Will
with the
it see
penis.
me?" Like,
Yeah,
"Oh
like, just like,
gosh."
what's the baby thinking? And so the number one thing I say is the baby has no idea
And does 0 care.
what's going on. There is no chance of the penis going into the uterus. Like, the baby is fully protected. Of course, like with certain special circumstances, your care provider will tell you not to have sex, but that's pretty rare.
Mhm.
Usually people are totally clear to have sex till the very end. And even when the baby is far enough along to be able to hear what's going on outside of the womb, they, like, even if you're talking dirty talk, the baby has
They have no
no.
idea.
Yeah,
They're just happy to hear your voice. They don't know
exactly.
daddy.
Exactly. Yeah, and actually the orgasm is soothing for the baby because you're having these light,
Oh, yeah.
surges through the uterus, your body's releasing, endorphins, oxytocin, so the baby feels great,
Loved and
Yeah, and
oh
they,
my
again,
gosh.
they have no idea. They have no idea.
Oh, it's so
So
funny.
parents can rest assured that, yeah, you're not going to scar your baby by
And are
having.
you gonna make yourself go into labor? Are you gonna do anything to endanger the pregnancy by having sex in late trimester?
You under most circumstances you're not, and if a woman has a special circumstance like an insufficient cervix, for example, like a cervix that's dilating early, typically you are going to know about those circumstances fairly early on, and your care provider, any good care provider, will clearly let you know you cannot have sex. You are not cleared to have sex. It is not going to put you into early labor if you're having a healthy pregnancy. And actually, once you reach your due date, or even before, the prostaglandins in semen can actually help to soften the cervix. So again, it's not going to make the cervix start to dilate early, but it's just like eating dates throughout the pregnancy. It just helps to prepare and soften the cervix to open.
Mhm.
So, it all can really help you actually have an easier labor.
Got it. Okay, so, I've been at births where the midwife says, "Okay, nothing's really happening here. Everybody's leaving the room. You guys, make some love." And, what are the midwives then really doing that? Why are they asking the couple to do that?
Yeah. So a couple reasons. So one is that a lot of times during sex, nipple stimulation happens, and nipple stimulation is one of the best ways to get the surges, the contractions going again, because it releases a lot of oxytocin. Again, just like with breastfeeding, that nipple stimulation releases the oxytocin. And then again, with the prostaglandins in the semen, if the man is able to ejaculate, that helps to soften the cervix and make it more susceptible to opening. And then it just a lot of times helps to relax the mom,
Yeah. Yeah.
you know?
Take her mind off the
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and distract her and then connect her with her partner and feel that love and for a moment just disconnect from any stress of, oh, I'm not dilating, this isn't happening, that's not happening, to just settling into the present moment, reconnecting with those feelings of love and connection. And a lot of times that stress relief combined with, the hormones and whatnot,
Mhm.
can help us get back into a good pattern with labor.
Perfect. Okay, so I wanted to ask some questions about post-birth, so
Yeah.
postpartum. So I've heard that some men don't want to have sex for a while after the baby's born, and so not only the mom, but like I mean, what happens if your partner was all excited and now he doesn't want to do that?
Mm-hmm.
What's causing
Yeah.
that?
Yeah. So one potential cause of that is when a man becomes a father, sometimes his testosterone levels decrease a little bit, which actually helps him, feel more maternal towards the baby and have more of that connection. So the hormones can shift his libido and impact how much he wants to have sex. Um, and then for some men, when they see their partner go through the process of labor and they see her become a mother, sometimes again, with going back to that, not being able to reconcile our sexual selves with parenthood, it can be difficult for men to again see their partner in that sexual life. So it's like, well, now you're the mother to my child, and but then if I have sex with you, I'm having sex with the mother of my child. And so they can kind of get in their head, and then women can have the same thing. It's like, well, now I'm a mother, how do I reconnect with my sexual self? So a lot of times, again, talking and kind of
Yeah,
working through it
talking.
and
Mhm.
continuing to have sex, even if at first it feels a little awkward, can usually help couples get through
Mhm.
that block. But yeah, that can be really common for men, again, and women, to not be interested in sex for a while.
I
And of
know a
course,
lot of
yeah.
women feel, shame about not being able to have sex the same way. I mean, especially if they tear and they've had a repair, then sex will feel different, and
Mhm.
sometimes they don't want it or it hurts, and then the partner feels bad, or the woman's like, it just changes all sorts of dynamics.
Yeah. Yeah. No, absolutely. And, what I usually recommend for women that are feeling like physically it just doesn't feel the same, is to have a conversation with their partner and let them know that I really need to lead the way in the beginning. I need to try out different positions.
Mhm.
Maybe you're doing oral sex, but to really, like, sometimes with our breast, if the man touches the breast, it actually is a turn off.
I'm like, "No
So
touchy, not yours."
yeah, like these are off limits, man. But yeah, to really encourage the woman to take charge and be really clear about what does and doesn't feel good to her. And then a lot of times it leads couples to finding a new way to have sex. It
Mhm.
might not look like what it used to, but they can find a new way that feels good for the woman. Because yeah, when a baby comes out, if you tear, your vagina is going to feel different positions are going to feel better than others. So you just kind of have to do some trial and error and be really clear with your partner about what feels good.
Perfect. Okay, so let's talk about, I think well, is there anything else sexuality-wise that we didn't cover? I feel like we went pretty darn deep.
Yeah, I mean, those are like the main
Yeah.
points that I usually hit with women with that concern.
Okay, let's go into some mind space things, some mind space questions. Like, what if a woman finds out the sex of her baby and she's just really crushed? She's really disappointed about that. And then she feels like, she shouldn't deserve this child or whatever it is.
Oh yeah. Yeah. So my first experience with this question is when it happened to me.
Oh,
I thought
well,
I
there we
thought my
go.
son was supposed to be a girl, and at the 20-week anatomy scan, they're like, "There's a penis," and I had a total breakdown. I and my husband
Oh,
actually he also was thinking it was a girl and had just gotten used to that idea. He hid his disappointment better than I did, but I had about like a 2-day period where I felt like I was in mourning for
Oh,
this girl that I thought I was supposed to have. And of course, now that I have my son, I wouldn't want anybody else. But yeah, so what looking back on that experience and supporting other women through this phenomenon helped me realize a few things. So, number one, of course, just because we learn the sex of the baby doesn't mean we know the gender, right?
mm-hmm.
So just because the sex is male anatomy doesn't mean that that boy will identify as a boy. It doesn't mean he'll like the typical boy activities. And then for me, what helped is I started to look at, okay, well, are there like any experiences with a son or like with a daughter that I can't have with a son? And it's like, really, with the
Nothing.
exception of supporting a woman through her period and like birth, and then with a boy kind of learning about his penis, it's like everything else, I can have the same experience.
Yeah, it's true because in our culture we don't prefer a certain gender. I mean, it would be hard if you're in a culture where females are not as valued as males, then that's rough. But in the American
Exactly.
culture, it's the same. So, but it is like dressing up in ribbons and bows. I know I had 2 boys first, and then I had a girl, and I was like, "Well, I this is dumb because I don't have anything pink and I don't like sparkles.
Yeah.
And so we're just going, it's fine. It's nature over nurture. I mean, nurture over nature.
Yep.
I'm just not going to expose this child to anything pink because I can't stand hair bows and whatever."
Yeah.
No, no, no. The minute the thing could find a fuchsia thing, the
She
fuchsia
was
thing
into
was
it.
on the thing. And she was all about sparkles and she wanted feathers on her pencils when she was 18 months and she wanted
Right.
all of the glitter. And then her sister that came after that was even worse. And I was like, oh, well, but it kind of like, I just realized that boys they were equally fun. Like okay, yeah, I got to teach my boys how to pee on trees and like aim at Cheerios in the toilet, but my girls were really fun when they wanted plumes on their pencils at 1.5. So it's
Yeah.
like everything was fun. I didn't know. I
Yeah.
wasn't super disappointed. So I can't relate like you said you did. But
Yeah.
in hindsight, I'm like, if I had that problem, I would just want to wrap my arms around me and say, it's gonna be okay. They're gonna be funny and
I know.
adorable no matter what.
And exactly, and then realizing you're having the unique little person that you're meant to have, and that
Yeah.
really helped me too. It's like, okay, this is the child I meant to have, and of course, I mean, I adore him, and like once you have the child, the this and I've heard this from every woman that had that disappointment. They're like, once that baby was in my arms, I could care less.
Yeah, exactly. Does not matter.
it,
Does not
it
matter.
just it doesn't
Yep.
matter,
Mm-mm.
but for women to realize that having that initial disappointment, if they do, that's okay. A lot of women feel that. A lot of people get a certain sex in their mind, like, okay, this is what I'm going to have and this is what's going to happen. And then if that idea is burst, it's okay to be disappointed. And then sadly that disappointment can turn into shame, like, oh, I should just be grateful, and then you beat yourself up. But just let yourself be disappointed, and then
Mhm.
know, usually even just after a couple of days, then you start to get used to the idea of
Mhm.
whatever the sex is, and you move on, and then you have your baby, and again, you don't care if it's a male or female.
And I know, like, if you're worried, like, say you had a boy first, you wanted another boy, brother, you wanted 2 brothers or 2 girls, and then you have the mix, and you're like, "Oh, they're not gonna play together," and then yeah, no, they will. They'll drool on each other. They'll be fine. They'll be fine.
Totally.
They'll fight. They can fight efficiently no matter what
Yeah.
gender
Exactly.
they are or identify as. Like, it does not
If they
matter.
have a penis or vagina, they can still go
It's
at it.
equally opportunity fighting. Yep, yep.
Oh,
Oh,
totally. For sure.
so what about the thoughts that go through a mom's head sometimes when she's pregnant with her second, worrying that she won't love this next baby as much?
Yeah, I'm going through that right now.
Oh, are you is your second you're pregnant with?
Yeah, I'm pregnant with my second.
Oh, so maybe I should just tell you what to think about this. Just kidding.
Yeah, I know, right? Like, what wisdom do you have for me? Yeah, what I have been, and my son, he's really concerned. He's like, "Are you guys gonna love me less?"
How old's your son?
Um, He's almost 8.
Okay, so he's completely yeah,
He's
I had my baby so fast, they didn't know who was coming. They had no
they
idea their world was
right.
gonna be rocked. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
But he
he's very, very aware. And it's funny because I was 8 when my little brother was born. So I remember, the feelings. And I think I mean, this might sound like cheesy, but I totally believe that like your heart just expands and it's not like we have this limit on the amount of love that we're
Mhm.
able to give. I truly believe that again, your heart expands as your family expands. And of course, the amount of time you have does not expand, sadly. So I'm sure that will be, something that I navigate. But and I think too, something that I've been thinking of it because I don't know this child, I mean, it still seems a little bit inconceivable that there'll be like some new person,
Yep, yep, that is a little weird. Yep.
you
Like,
know?
but can you remember your life before your husband? Like, you sorta, but you're like, "Could I have even have dreamed of him and now he's, like, real?" Yeah.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
you are spot on, I will just say, so now that I can come from an old crone
Yes.
position.
Tell me your wisdom,
It did
please.
surprise it shocked me with my second baby because I had so many worries, and of course, I didn't wanna voice that. I was so I didn't wanna be ungrateful for what I had, or I didn't wa but I was so worried. And yeah, when my second son was born, it's like the weird thing about love is it's not quantifiable. Like I mean, you can love somebody and you love that person to the maximum that you can love that one person. But then when that second baby comes, you all of a sudden have the same amount of love for that next baby as you do for the first one. So it's not like you have double love. It doesn't work that way. It's like that one person, that new
Yeah.
baby gets their own version of your complete love. And
Oh, I
it's
love
just
that.
and it happened 4 times. It was weird. I mean,
That's
just
amazing. Yeah. Well,
and
that's
now
very encouraging to hear. And
it's
that
just
totally
it's
makes
really
sense.
neat. And I think it's the same for the siblings too, as they welcome their siblings in. They
Yeah.
just, they had more room in their heart.
That's what we told our son this morning, actually. It's like you're gonna have more love in your life too. You're gonna have this sister that loves you and you're gonna love her. I mean, there's just gonna be more love all around. And I think that helped him feel a little
Yeah.
bit better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the second babies, I mean, my first was 2 years after or 2 years. They're all 2 years apart. And I
Yeah.
really bad at math. I was like, "Let's wait less time," and then they kept coming. But, I know that with your 8-year-old, he'll probably be pretty helpful, he'll probably be like, "Hey, go get mommy that, nursing pad as you're
Yeah.
squirting all over the place. Hey, go grab that diaper as you're or grab the wipes. I forgot the thing." So there are some perks about having other children around.
Yeah, no, I agree. And he loves babies. He's very nurturing. So I think not that there won't be hiccups, but
Yeah,
I think that it'll be, yeah, really, really
yeah.
beautiful
But
experience.
he's over the phase where he'll smack him in the car with a or smack him in the face with the car, so
Yeah,
that's
right. Let's hope so.
let's hope so, I mean, then that indicates other problems.
Well, right. I know. Then we have a whole other load of issues. But yeah,
Yeah,
no,
so
I'm sure that
what are some of the other mind games that pregnant and postpartum women will play in their heads that are shrouded in shame?
yeah. Well, this is a little bit in the same vein of what we've been talking about. I've had a lot of women tell me, after I had my first child, like, of course, again, like we were saying, I love all my children equally, but now, like, my older child kind of like irritates me more. Like, I feel like,
Oh,
again, while I love them
yeah.
equally, I actually like the baby more than the older one, or and they feel so much shame around that,
Oh,
like, oh,
yeah,
I feel
yeah.
so guilty
No,
because
I actually tell my child which ones they're my favorite at that moment.
I love that.
I just make sure I'm doing the math, but I'm like, "Oh, you cleaned your room. You are totally my favorite 3rd child today.
You're my
Thank
favorite.
you so much for being my favorite 3rd child. I'm your only 3rd child, mom. I know, but you are my favorite."
That's so funny because I mean, and it's natural. Like even with like adults in our life, we go through seasons with humans,
Mhm,
right? Like
mhm.
for a while, our brother might just like really be pissing us off for a couple months, and then he's our favorite person again. With our mothers, it's like we love them one minute, they're irritating us the next. I mean, our like likes and dislikes with different people, again, how much they're irritating us, it just changes.
And I think it all comes back to communication, and we're different than our parents and our grandparents for sure, and how much we talk to our children. I know I talk to my children as adults. My parents, they treated me with respect, and my dad especially would talk to me like an adult, but he was still always a parent in my mind. And just the comments my kids make to me make me realize they see me differently than I saw my parents. Like my parents
Yeah.
could do no wrong. They were the gods of my world, right?
Yeah.
And my
Yeah.
kids definitely let me know that that's not the case for them. But
Yeah.
I love having these honest conversations, because if we can laugh about things, like one of the jokes now is the little one still smells good, and the other ones smell pubescent, you know? And so, like, their brother first, their for older brother, I noticed, I was like, oh man, 11-year-olds smell differently than 10-year-olds. And
Oh, yeah.
anyway, so now I only have one left, and I'll snuggle with all like, thank you for smelling so good. And the 11 will be like, I still smell good. I'm like, well,
You feel
see,
different.
it's not different. And anyway, but we can laugh about it. And then when they have concerns, like when they have, I mean, if you can joke about, but they still know they're loved.
Right.
I'm not going to nuzzle my nose in their scalp, after
Yeah,
they
right.
haven't
Exactly. It's
freshly bathed right now. I mean, I think it's a dumb example, but I think having living through intense dysfunction and then finding a level of
Mm.
beautiful function and balance, I
Yeah.
know the difference. And the difference is communication and being honest with your kids and being sensitive to um, you know, their worries and stuff, but being able to joke
Right.
about some of these like real life things.
Totally. Yeah. Right. To bring some levity, which is such a great lesson for life,
Oh,
right?
like I have an
Oh,
example the other way. So I had one child misbehaving, and their younger sibling took me aside and said, "Is that what happens when you become a teenager? Because if that's the case, I don't want to do that to you, mom. I love you, mom." So
oh,
there's like that side of the you smell and you don't smell kind. Like so
yeah.
that open conversation, I'm like, yeah, you probably will be a little stink because most teenagers are, but I really appreciate that you see it, because if you can see it, then you can make choices about it. And if you're being a stink, I can remind you when you're 13 and you'll know what you're talking about. And they're
Yeah.
like, "Yeah, mom, you're probably right." So those types of, oh man, can you imagine? Like it's my third child that's really insightful like this. So I didn't get that
Yeah.
opportunity with the first two, but
Yeah.
she just notices things. And I'm like, this gives you so much power and control over your own destiny and your own you notice
Absolutely.
these anyway. Wow, that was a tangent. I don't know where we started. But yeah, just don't feel so ashamed in what you can and can't talk to your kids about.
Exactly. Yeah. Right. All comes back to that communication.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So what is anything else that comes to mind with your mindset?
Yeah, yeah. Something else that came to mind, on a much more serious level is the like intrusive thoughts that some
Oh,
moms can
yeah.
have,
Mhm.
and having these thoughts, like for example, when bathing your child, like, oh my God, if I just held them under the water, they could die, or like having a vision of like a car accident, or having these really, really intense, scary thoughts about the baby. And a lot of women do not talk about these because they think if I tell my care provider that I'm having these thoughts,
Mhm.
they are going to report me,
Mhm.
and it's just going to be, this whole horrible thing. And so something really important, I go deep into this in the book, is for
Mhm.
women to realize, so thoughts like that can a lot of times come from postpartum, anxiety, postpartum OCD,
Mhm.
postpartum depression, things that are very, very, very common. Almost all women have some intrusive thoughts, especially in early motherhood. When it's dangerous, and this is very rare, is when it goes into postpartum psychosis. And the difference is you don't recognize that the thoughts are quote unquote like wrong or scary. So it's so important for women to realize, if you recognize that, like, oh, I don't like this thought, this isn't good, you're going to be okay.
You are the
Right.
first person, even when I have interviewed psychologists, you're the first person to say it so succinctly and correctly. Yes, when
Thank you.
your line blurs between reality and non-reality,
Yeah.
that is when it's dangerous. And so you would never drive your van into an ocean. You would never drown your 5 babies in the bathtub. If
Yeah.
you would, you're not probably not listening to this podcast,
Well,
and you
right.
don't even know that you're really doing it, that it's wrong at all. So there's
Exactly.
that distinction. And I
Yeah.
want to say, because I feel very strongly about this topic about intrusive thoughts,
Yeah.
I experienced them. First
Yeah.
of all, I would say do be careful on who you tell. But first of all, I hear you. This
Yeah.
podcast, if you have had intrusive thoughts both during
Yeah.
pregnancy and afterwards, I hear you. So there's one person in this world, at least, that you can trust. You can email me. My email is media@birthcircle.com. You
Yeah.
can email me. Do be careful who you talk to. if it's not a very trusted professional or very trusted family friend,
Mhm.
then yeah, it can backfire. And I've heard horrible stories, but don't let those deter you from getting the help you need. So
Right.
that's the second thing.
Mhm.
And then, yeah, what you said about knowing the difference. And the other thing that I had a friend, after I'd recovered and healed, done a lot of healing, she mentioned, she's a midwife. She said, "You're not responsible for the first thought that comes into your mind. So those intrusive thoughts, you have no control over them, and you are not responsible for them.
Mhm.
The second thought, you do have more control. So if the first thought is, I should put my baby, like the things you're saying, they're not triggering to me, but they, that's right on. I could still be triggered if you kept going, right?
Yeah, yeah,
But the second thought is, no, I won't do that. Or the second thought could be, all right, brain, you want to go there with me? Let's think through this logically. What would happen? Awful things would happen. I wouldn't want to do it. That's so interesting that you would make me think that, but I'm not going to do it. And then like let it go, right?
yeah,
'Cause okay. So
yeah,
box done. I just this shame, it just makes me crazy to when I hear women just like stuffing these thoughts, because I did the same thing because I didn't know that it
yeah,
wasn't not normal. Wait, I
yeah.
didn't know that it was normal.
Yeah. Yeah. And typically I had two friends that are psychologists that helped me a lot with the book. And one does specialize, in postpartum health. And she's like, those are typically like even more than your medical care provider to find, a mental health specialist that specializes in postpartum care
Yep.
because they're the ones that know this research typically,
Mhm.
hopefully,
Mhm.
they're the ones that understand the difference,
Mhm.
and can really, yeah, provide like beautiful support, like
Yep.
your friend.
And
Uh,
knowing that you have something going on, that's half the battle. I know I feel like most
yeah,
of my postpartum OCD, like I didn't have it at all with the fourth. And I
yeah,
think a big part of that is, first of all, more support and
right,
understanding, but also
yeah,
just knowing that I was susceptible to it. So when those thoughts came, I mean, you've got was it neuroplasticity. So the more thoughts that come through, you're like creating, highways of information on your brain.
yeah,
So just not entertaining those thoughts by the end, just
yeah,
knowing that they existed, but I didn't have to think about them anymore. That
right,
helped a lot.
yeah, yeah. No, that's a great, yeah.
Yeah. And uh, yeah. I I thought of something else, but it's gone. So let's keep going. All right. Anything else about the mindset?
Oh my gosh. I'm oh yeah, sorry. I've talk about pregnancy brain. I'm like just like I'm like, oh, I had a thought a millisecond ago. It's
Yeah.
already gone.
Raise your
Where did
hand. I'll
that
tell you what your name is.
go?
Um,
Yeah, like well, actually, okay. So going like one thing that I support a lot of women through is fear of dying during childbirth, and I get a lot of women that
Ooh.
really have that come up big, and a lot of times, not always, but a lot of times that is somewhat coupled with a fear of the hospital. And this is women that are like, I don't want to have a home birth, but I don't feel comfortable in the hospital. So that's an aspect of it is setting that's triggering them. But then also these deep-seated fears about death, during childbirth. And of course, sadly, you look at the statistics of Black women in the United States and how
Mhm.
of course they do have a higher likelihood of death, and so it still is a very real issue that we need to tackle in this country. But looking at our chances of dying versus like back in the early 1900s compared to now, I mean, it is so we're so or most women are so safe during the process, and that's a very can be a very complex issue, and I support a lot of women with it through, number one, if it's a very very severe fear, of course, helping them find a mental health specialist who specializes in prenatal health and all of the things that come up during pregnancy. And then we do a lot of unpacking of the fear, and it's different for every woman, trying to find
Yeah.
the source or sources, like where is it coming from, where what caused that. And sadly, a
Mhm.
lot of times it's just our culture in general. You think about all the images we see of birth, it's like, oh my
Mhm.
god, that's terrifying, a lot of
Yeah.
negative, fearful messages. But That's a big one, and sometimes it's not even like a fear of death, but just a really big fear of what's gonna happen. Fear of the
Yeah.
unknown, right?
Yeah. Maybe it just boils down to that. Yeah.
Yeah,
But
just
not
not
to
knowing
be
what's gonna
ashamed if
happen.
you have those feelings, but to tell
Yeah,
someone about it. Yeah. And it's not necessarily a premonition. It's not a premonition for
exactly.
99.999%.
That's such a great point.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Realizing that just yeah.
So this whole thing we've talked a lot about shame today. If
Mhm.
left in a shame mentality, how does it affect a woman's journey into her new motherhood?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of times it makes us kind of close in on ourselves.
Mm,
It makes us start to feel because like the more we hold stuff in, the more we feel like we have to hold stuff in. You know, it's like if I let anything out now, it's all just going to come out. So I just have to like totally zip it up, and sadly, it can trigger or intensify. You know, postpartum depression, anxiety, OCD. It can exaggerate that. It it can make us doubt, you know, our instincts, our
mhm.
abilities as mothers. You know, and a lot of times, and I'm speaking from my own experience, you know, I tricked myself into thinking, well, they're just like these little questions and stuff like that. It's not that big of a deal. I shouldn't worry about it, when really looking back, it's like, oh God, this caused so much shame.
Mm,
And my confidence level in mothering plummeted because I didn't feel safe to
confidence.
share, yeah, or
Yeah.
explore what I was wondering or what I was experiencing. Yeah, I didn't feel safe to be open. So I think it
Mm.
can cause all sorts of issues, but yeah, it
So when
can
you were saying
really
that
shut
that you
down.
change yeah, that you it changes how you mother, I don't know, something you said just made me think, how was your relationship with your mother? Are there things that your mom said to you that made you feel like these should be shameful things? And can we stop that? Or can we go backwards and say, hey, mom, when you say, I mean, what do we do? Because I think a lot of our shame is inherited, right?
Yeah, well, and it's so interesting because I got so lucky because my mom is like so open, and she didn't. I mean, I'm sure there's like some things, like we're from the South, like from Texas, so there's some things we all inherited about like sweep it under the rug, you know. And got so lucky because by the time I was born, like she was actively trying to to change that and was more aware. um
Mm,
but yeah, you know, just that culture in general, you know, like especially down there, it's like, oh nope, I'm fine, you're fine, everything's fine. So that was part of it. Yeah. And I've actually talked to my mom about that just in general. You know, it's like how our family handles different situations. Like, nope, nope, everybody's fine. Don't worry about it. Don't talk about it.
yeah.
So yeah, absolutely. Your family of origin can deeply impact how comfortable you feel
Yeah.
talking about all this stuff. And strangely, like sex, that was the one thing that wasn't a big issue for me, because that was one thing my mom always felt like. She's a nurse, so like the bodily stuff, like from childhood, she was like, I knew what sex was when I was 4. Like she was always so open. And so I've actually never really thought of it too much until you asked me that question. So I didn't have a lot of shame around that, but the
Hmm.
emotional stuff,
Yeah. The
you
emotional
know,
stuff.
the
Yeah.
emotional stuff was really
So if you got the
triggering
emotional stuff
for
plus
me.
the physical stuff, oh man.
Then it's just, oh, it's
Yeah.
such a big mountain to
Yeah.
climb. But
I
yeah.
mean, I didn't even know I was gonna birth a placenta. Like, there was just so much I didn't know.
Right.
I was, like, highly like, I was indignant. I was offended that I had to do something else coming out, like
Yeah, right. Isn't
but
that
it's just
it?
I just yeah, just more conversations. I know if you're listening to this podcast, you're already on a great path to figuring stuff out a lot more than I had when I was and definitely more than our moms and our grandmas.
Yep.
So, all right, tell everybody, where they can find your new book and just how they can connect with you, get more information.
Absolutely. Yeah. So the book, it's available from Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Target, Walmart, all your indie bookstores, pretty much wherever books are found. And then on my website, baileygaddis.com, it helps you link to all those places. And it's kind of the hub for everything about me and my work.
Very cool, cool.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for joining me again. Like I said, this is super rare, but I love how open you are. I love just how candid and and you have the information that's
No.
needed. So yes, please, if you have, please find this 101. What if you'd found 102? Would you have just made it 102 answers or what?
Oh my God. I probably had like 150 and my publisher is like, you have to
Oh, dumb
make this
publisher.
book shorter.
So maybe we'll do a second one because really,
Yeah.
like this stuff is not going to go away. I hope that our granddaughters are not like this book. You know how you read these how to be a good housewife articles from 1950s and you just
Yeah.
shudder and you're like, really? Did they think this way? I hope that
Totally.
your book is that irrelevant to our grandchildren, right?
Ditto.
Yeah.
Ditto. Yeah.
Yeah. That we're
Absolutely.
just our
Amen
granddaughters
to
laugh
that.
about it and be like,
Yeah. Like,
"Oh, grandma was so
I
backwards."
love that. So that's such a great point. Yes. Hopefully all of the shame
So
is
everybody needs to read this book so it can become irrelevant.
totally. Yes. Yes, please.
Good
Thank you
goals,
so much.
author goals, right?
Yeah, right. Oh my
Awesome.
God.
Thank you so much for joining me again.
Thank you. This is awesome.